The rain had just begun to fall when Ethan Bennett parked his car outside the small two-story house he and Marcia called home. Through the kitchen window he could see her moving about, calm, deliberate, setting the table for two. It was their ritual, quiet and predictable, a scene that would have looked perfect to anyone watching from the street. But inside, perfection had grown heavy, like wallpaper that wouldn't peel no matter how many times he tried to change it. Dinner was silent except for the rain tapping on the roof. Marcia's smile was polite, but it never reached her eyes. She asked about his day at the repair shop, nodded at the right moments, and stared into her plate when he spoke of the co-worker's promotion he didn't get. Ethan studied her face, tracing every gesture that felt rehearsed. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. She didn't look up. "Just tired." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Tired of what?" Her fork paused midair, and for a heartbeat, she almost said something real, but the moment slipped. "Nothing, Ethan. Really." She gave a faint laugh, brittle as glass. He smiled back because that's what good husbands do when they sense something breaking. They pretend it isn't. After dinner, Ethan washed the dishes while Marcia stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the storm. The streetlights cast her shadow long and thin across the floor. He wanted to ask what she was thinking, but something in her stillness told him he no longer had the right to. In bed, she turned away from him before he could reach for her. Her hair fell across the pillow like a curtain, closing him out. He stared at the ceiling and listened to her breathing. Steady, distant. Once that sound had soothed him. Tonight it felt like a wall. Outside, thunder rolled, low and restless. Ethan's mind drifted back to when they first met at the university library 12 years ago. She'd been shy, always scribbling notes in the margins of romance novels. He'd been the confident one, making her laugh when she barely knew him. He remembered how she'd once said, "You make me feel seen." Now he wasn't sure she saw him at all. He turned toward her sleeping form. "Marcia," he whispered, "are we okay?" No answer, just rain against glass. The next morning smelled of coffee and distance. Marcia moved around the kitchen briskly, her phone lighting up with messages she didn't explain. She told him she had errands to run, pressed a quick kiss to his cheek, and left before he could ask where she was going. He watched her car disappear down the street. For a moment he thought of calling after her, but what would he say? That something felt wrong? That love didn't sound like silence? At the shop, Ethan tried to lose himself in the clatter of tools and the hum of engines, but her face lingered in his thoughts, the tightness in her smile, the sudden flinch when he'd touched her hand last night. It wasn't anger, it was something colder. When he returned home that evening, the lights were off. A note sat on the kitchen counter in Marcia's neat handwriting. "Had to step out for a bit. Don't wait up." He stood there for a long time, staring at the words. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like thunder. For the first time, Ethan felt a quiet fear bloom in his chest, a sense that something precious was slipping away, not with noise or chaos, but with unbearable calm. And somewhere inside that stillness, Marcia's secret had already begun to grow. The morning after the storm, sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles, turning the world deceptively bright. Marcia sat alone at the table, coffee untouched, her phone buzzing with notifications she ignored. Ethan had already left for work, leaving behind the faint smell of motor oil and the sound of the front door closing. Another day, like all the others. But something in her had shifted. The night before had been unbearable. She'd lain awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down like a secret she hadn't even made yet. For months, she had been living two lives, one visible, one silent. The visible one smiled, cooked dinner, and kept up appearances. The silent one counted hours until escape. On her way to the grocery store that morning, she passed a convenience shop on the corner. A bright red banner hung outside. Lottery jackpot now, at $50 million. The numbers glowed beneath it like a taunt from the universe. She stopped. It wasn't greed that pulled her inside. It was the idea of something changing. A way out she couldn't yet define. She stood in line behind, a man arguing about the price of cigarettes, her fingers trembling as she pulled a crumpled $5 bill from her purse. When the clerk handed her the ticket, she barely looked at it. It wasn't a plan. It was a reflex. That night, she left the folded ticket on the counter, half forgotten beneath a pile of bills. Ethan came home, kissed her cheek, and didn't notice the thin strip of paper that would rewrite their lives. They ate dinner in silence again. The same meal, the same distance. Marcia wanted to tell him something, anything that could bridge the gap, but every word she tried to speak sounded like a lie. Later, while Ethan watched television, she found herself alone in the kitchen, her eyes drifting to the ticket. The numbers on the news caught her attention. One by one, they matched. At first, she thought it was coincidence, then delirium, and then her knees went weak. All 6 numbers. Marcia stared at the television, her pulse thundering in her ears. The room seemed to tilt. $50 million. The world had just handed her everything she could ever need, and at the same time, everything she could never explain. She clutched the ticket to her chest, breath shaking, eyes filling with tears she couldn't control. It wasn't joy that came first. It was panic. She could already see Ethan's face, already hear his voice. "We did it, Marcia. We're rich." But the thought didn't warm her. It terrified her. Because she knew him, knew how hard life had been, how often money had defined their worth. She'd watched him struggle, humiliated by rejections, desperate to prove himself. And now she wondered what kind of man he'd become if the world suddenly handed him power. She couldn't let him know, not yet. In the hours that followed, she hid the ticket inside an old jewelry box, beneath letters from her mother, under pieces of a life she'd long outgrown. She checked it twice before bed, whispering to herself, "It's safe." That night, she dreamt of drowning, not in water, but in questions. Over the next few days, she moved through life like a ghost. Ethan didn't notice the subtle changes. The way she'd started taking calls in another room, the quiet smiles when she thought no one was watching. Inside her, a war had begun. The lottery had given her freedom, but it also demanded deceit. At work, she called the lottery office in secret. They confirmed her numbers, and her new identity would soon be processed. She could claim the money anonymously. Her hands trembled as she ended the call. For the first time in years, she could choose the direction of her life. But freedom came with a cost. That evening, Ethan came home with flowers, trying to mend what neither of them understood. He handed them to her awkwardly. "For you," he said. She smiled, soft and false. "They're beautiful." As she placed the flowers in a vase, her reflection caught her eye in the kitchen window. Behind her, Ethan laughed at something on TV. Ahead of her, the world waited. Quiet, golden, and full of danger. Marcia whispered to her, "Reflection. I have to do this." And with that, the secret between them became the sharpest weapon she'd ever hold. Marcia stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair with slow, mechanical strokes. The reflection staring back wasn't the same woman who used to laugh at Ethan's clumsy dancing or dream about small vacations they'd never take. Her eyes had grown sharper, calculating, always scanning for a way out. It had been 3 months since she'd won the lottery. The ticket was gone now, cashed, claimed under a false name, transformed into accounts no one could trace. $50 million, enough to start over anywhere, to erase every trace of who she used to be. Yet the guilt that came with it was heavier than the money itself. Ethan noticed the distance but didn't understand it. He mistook her quietness for fatigue, her distraction for stress. Every evening he tried to reach for her, to reclaim the warmth that had vanished, and every night she pulled away a little further. One evening, she found him in the living room holding an old photo, taken the year they got married. "You remember this day?" he asked, voice soft, almost childlike. She did. It had been raining that morning too, and they'd laughed under the same umbrella, soaked and breathless. That memory now felt like it belonged to strangers. "Of course," she said, forcing a smile. He looked up at her, eyes hopeful. "We can get back there, you know. Maybe a trip? Something new?" She hesitated. "Ethan, I think we've grown into different people." His smile faltered. Different doesn't mean broken. But she knew better. The distance between them wasn't something time could heal. It was built on lies. Lies she could never unmake. That night, after he'd gone to bed, Marcia sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, staring at the email she'd drafted weeks ago to her lawyer. "I want to proceed with the divorce." Her finger hovered over the send button. The words blurred. Her stomach twisted. Then she clicked send. The following morning, Ethan found her waiting at the dining table, dressed neatly, expression calm but unreadable. She pushed an envelope toward him. "What's this?" "Divorce papers." The silence that followed was unbearable. He blinked, as though the words hadn't registered. "Marcia?" "What?" "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I need a new start." He laughed, a sound of disbelief and hurt tangled together. "A new start? With who? Is there someone else?" "No." She looked down. "There isn't anyone." He stepped closer, voice trembling. "Then why? Tell me what I did wrong. I'll fix it." "You didn't do anything wrong." Her throat burned as she said it. "That's the problem. You'll never understand." She left the table before he could say more, afraid that if she stayed, she'd crumble. He followed her to the door, pleading, shouting her name, but she didn't turn back. Outside, the morning sun glared too bright. She slipped on her sunglasses, heart pounding as she got into the taxi waiting at the curb. The driver asked, "Where to?" "Anywhere but here," she whispered. As the car pulled away, she caught a glimpse of Ethan in the rearview mirror, barefoot on the porch, confusion etched deep into his face. It was the image that would haunt her for years. In her hotel room that night, she stared at the city lights through the window. Her phone buzzed with Ethan's messages, dozens of them. She read none. Instead, she opened a new account in her alias name, booked a one-way ticket, and wired the first transfer of her winnings to an overseas bank. Her old life ended quietly. No tears, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. And somewhere deep down, she knew the silence would one day demand a price. Ethan woke to an empty house. At first, he thought Marcia had gone for a walk. She often did that when she needed space. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the silence thickened. Her closet was half empty. Her phone sat on the nightstand, turned off. The wedding ring she used to wear every day was gone. He searched every corner of the house like a man chasing ghosts. Her perfume still lingered in the air. Her favorite mug was missing from the cabinet, and yet it all felt staged, like a scene abandoned in haste. On the counter, only the divorce papers remained, unsigned by him but final in her handwriting. By evening, worry turned to disbelief. He called her friends, her office, even her mother. No one knew where she was. The lawyer refused to give details. "She requested privacy," the voice on the other end said. "You'll receive further notice once proceedings are finalized." Privacy. The word sliced him open. Days became weeks. Ethan stopped sleeping, haunted by every fight they'd ever had, every quiet moment that now felt like a clue. He replayed their last conversation 100 times, trying to find the moment she'd stopped loving him. But love didn't vanish overnight. It evaporated, silently, drop by drop, until you only noticed when it was gone. Neighbors whispered when they saw him alone. "She left him," one woman muttered as he passed. "Probably ran off with someone." Others were kinder, bringing casseroles and pity. Ethan smiled politely, his face hollow, his eyes fixed on nothing. The bank called next. Marcia had withdrawn nearly all their joint savings. No forwarding address, no explanation. Just a trail of absence. One night, after another sleepless stretch, Ethan sat at the kitchen table surrounded by unopened mail and empty bottles. He stared at her note again. Had to step out for a bit. Don't wait up. He hadn't noticed it then, but now it felt prophetic. She hadn't just stepped out of the house. She'd stepped out of his life. He went to the police a week later, not to accuse her of a crime, but to admit defeat. "She's missing," he said. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Missing or left you?" Ethan hesitated. "Both, maybe." The report was filed, but no one searched. No foul play, no trace, just a woman who'd chosen to disappear. Months blurred together. Ethan sold their house, unable to stand the silence. He moved into a small apartment near the edge of town where no one knew him. He found work fixing engines again, losing himself in the rhythm of machines, things that could be repaired, unlike people. Every night, though, he'd check her social media, hoping for a sign, a post, a photograph, even a rumor. But the profiles were gone, deleted like she'd never existed. And yet sometimes, late at night, he'd dream of her voice, soft, distant, calling his name. He'd wake in darkness, reaching for her, only to feel the empty side of the bed, cold as truth. He tried to hate her. It would have been easier that way, but all he felt was a hollow ache that refused to fade. Then, one morning, 5 years later, while scrolling through a local news site, Ethan froze. The headline read, "Philanthropist Marcia Hale donates $2 million to Women's Shelter Fund." The photo beneath it showed a woman in a navy dress, hair shorter, posture poised, but unmistakably her. The wife who had vanished had resurfaced. Only now, she had a new name. Ethan stared at the article on his cracked laptop screen, his breath caught between disbelief and fury. The woman in the photo looked older, polished, elegant. Her name read Marcia Hale, but her eyes, those same dark, guarded eyes, were unmistakably his wife's. He hadn't spoken her name in years, not aloud. It had become a ghost that haunted his silence, the echo of something unfinished. Now it was as if she'd come back to life under a different name, wrapped in luxury and lies. For a long moment, he just sat there, frozen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. Then, slowly, his hand reached for the mouse. He clicked the article. The page loaded with details that didn't fit the woman he once knew. Marcia Hale, widowed philanthropist and investor, known for her contributions to domestic abuse shelters across the state. A widow. He laughed bitterly. Widowed, he repeated to the empty room. From what? Me? His reflection in the laptop screen looked older than he remembered, lines carved deep by time and loss. 5 years had stripped him of everything soft. The mechanic's shop, the little house, the laughter, they had all faded into memories he avoided. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside into the cold evening air. The city had changed around him, new faces, new stores, but everything still smelled faintly like rain, the same scent that always reminded him of her. At a corner cafe, Ethan met with David, an old friend who now worked as a local journalist. He slid the printed article across the table. "You ever heard of her?" Ethan asked. David scanned it, eyebrows lifting. "Yeah, actually. She's been making waves lately. Big donations, charity events, all that. Why?" "Because that's my wife," Ethan said flatly. David stared at him, unsure whether to laugh. "You mean your ex-wife, right? She never signed the papers." Ethan's tone was sharp, brittle. "She disappeared, and now she's back as someone else." David whistled under his breath. "You sure it's her?" Ethan leaned forward, tapping the photo. "Look at the scar under her jaw. She got that when we were remodeling the kitchen. It's her." David's expression turned cautious. "If what you're saying is true, this could be big. But what do you want from her, Ethan? Money? Closure?" "I just want the truth," he said quietly. That night he couldn't sleep. The image of Marcia's face burned in his mind, refined, smiling, untouched by guilt. He searched her name online again, finding endless pictures of her at galas and fundraisers. She looked happy, free, unrecognizable. One article mentioned a charity gala happening later that week in her city. Ethan stared at the date, pulse quickening. It wasn't far, just a few hours' drive. For 5 years he had lived with questions that ate at him from the inside. Maybe now he'd finally get answers. He spent the next 2 days preparing in silence. He fixed up his old car, printed the article, and packed a small bag. Every object felt heavy with purpose. He didn't tell David or anyone else where he was going. When he finally hit the highway, the night stretched out before him like a long confession. The sound of tires on asphalt mingled with memories, the way Marcia used to hum while cooking, the way she used to laugh before everything soured. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw her. Maybe he'd shout. Maybe he'd just stand there speechless. But he had to see her, to look her in the eye and ask why. As he crossed the city limits, the skyline of her new world shimmered in the distance, bright, untouchable. And somewhere in that glow, the woman who once vanished was waiting for him. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and laughter, every corner soaked in wealth. Ethan stood near the entrance, his jacket damp from the drizzle outside, feeling wildly out of place among the tuxedos and champagne. He had driven all night to get here, fueled by anger, confusion, and a hollow ache he hadn't been able to name for 5 years. Across the room, she stood beneath a cascade of golden light, smiling for photographers. Marcia Hale. The name still burned like acid. Her posture was elegant, her movements deliberate, as though she had practiced every gesture for a new life that erased the old one. He watched her for a long time before stepping forward. Every sound seemed to fade, the music, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, until there was only the echo of his footsteps crossing the marble floor. When she finally noticed him, the smile froze. The color drained from her face. For the first time, the perfect facade cracked. "Hello, Marcia," he said quietly. She blinked, her voice caught somewhere between shock and dread. "Ethan?" He nodded. "Or do you prefer Mrs. Hale now?" She glanced around, panic flickering in her eyes. "Not here," she whispered. "Please." They stepped out into a corridor lined with mirrors, their reflections fractured and infinite. The sound of distant music throbbed like a heartbeat. "I thought you were dead," Ethan said, his voice raw. 5 years, Marcia. 5 years of wondering where you went, what I did wrong. And then I find you, draped in diamonds, donating millions. Marcia's hands trembled. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," he said. "I need answers." She exhaled shakily, as if she'd been holding her breath since the moment she saw him. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "It wasn't about money, Ethan. I had to leave." "You had to?" His voice cracked. "You tore my life apart. I begged you to tell me what was wrong." She stepped closer, her perfume faint but familiar. "If I'd stayed, you would have been destroyed. You don't know what I was caught in." "Then tell me." Her eyes darted down the hallway. "Not here," she whispered again. "Meet me tomorrow morning. The Willow Park Cafe, 9 a.m. I'll explain everything. Just don't make a scene." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You owe me more than that." "I owe you the truth," she said softly, "but only if you're ready to hear it." For a moment they just stood there, two ghosts from different lives. He wanted to reach for her, to touch her hand and prove Saul's. He was real, but the distance between them wasn't measured in steps. It was built of years and secrets. A voice from the ballroom called out, "Mrs. Hale, we're ready for your speech." She straightened, slipping the mask back on with chilling precision. "Please, Ethan," she murmured. "Tomorrow, I promise." Then she turned and walked back into the light, applause rising to greet her. Ethan watched as she stood at the podium, smiling for the cameras, her voice poised and perfect. To everyone else, she was a saint. To him, she was a mystery wrapped in betrayal. He left before the event ended, the sound of her voice echoing behind him. Outside, the rain had returned, steady, relentless. He stood under a streetlight, drenched, staring up at the Grand Hotel sign glowing above. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a message. Unknown number. He opened it. "Willow Park Cafe. Don't be late. There are things I can't say over the phone." For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir in him. Fear, curiosity, maybe both. Tomorrow, the answers he'd been chasing were finally within reach. But somewhere deep down, a quiet instinct warned him. Whatever truth she carried was going to hurt. And it might just change everything. The Willow Park Cafe was quiet that morning, its windows fogged from the cool drizzle outside. Ethan arrived early, sitting at a corner table where he could see the entrance. His coffee had gone cold by the time Marcia finally walked in, wrapped in a beige coat, her sunglasses failing to hide the exhaustion written across her face. She hesitated before approaching, scanning the room as if expecting someone to be watching. Then she sat down opposite him, her hands trembling slightly as she set her bag on the table. "You came," she said softly. "I said I would," Ethan replied, his tone restrained. "Now tell me why you vanished, why you lied." Marcia took a deep breath. "I didn't just vanish, Ethan. I was forced to disappear." He frowned. "Forced by who?" Her eyes darted to the window. "Do you remember Leonard Ward? Ethan stiffened. Your boss from the firm? She nodded. He wasn't just my boss. He was running an off-the-books investment network. Money laundering, political bribes, everything. I found out by accident. Stumbled on a file labeled Project Nightfall. Ethan leaned closer. And? It detailed fake charities, offshore accounts, even identities. He was using innocent employees' names, mine included, to move money. I confronted him, thinking it was some mistake. Her voice cracked. 2 days later, my apartment was broken into. My car was followed. I knew if I didn't leave, I'd end up dead. Ethan's chest tightened. So you ran? I didn't have a choice, she whispered. Leonard made it look like I stole the money. I thought if I disappeared, it would all fade away. But he didn't stop. He just shifted the story. Made me the scapegoat. She reached into her bag and slid a flash drive across the table. This is the only copy of the file I managed to save before I left. Everything is in here. Names, accounts, transfers. It's the reason I can't sleep at night. Ethan stared at it. Why give it to me now? Because Leonard's dead, she said quietly. And before he died, he sent me a message. You'll never outrun ghosts. I don't know what it means, but someone else is looking for this. They think I still have it. I needed someone I trust. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Trust? You left me with no answers for 5 years. I know, she whispered, and I'll live with that. But please, if anything happens to me, make sure this gets to the authorities. Don't open it. Don't get involved. Her tone made him uneasy. Marcia, you're scaring me. Before she could answer, a crash echoed from the front of the cafe. 2 men entered, suits, dark coats, eyes sharp. Marcia froze. Ethan saw the terror flicker across her face before she masked it. They found me, she breathed. Who are they? She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. Go out the back door. Now. Marcia. Go! She hissed, thrusting the flash drive into his hand. He hesitated only a moment before slipping it into his jacket and ducking toward the back exit. Behind him, he heard one of the men call her name sharply, followed by the low hum of tense conversation. Outside, the rain had turned to a downpour. Ethan ran down the alley, his heart pounding until he reached his car. He wiped the rain from his face and looked at the small metal drive in his palm. It felt heavier than it should, like a key to something enormous and dangerous. Through the cafe window, he saw Marcia still inside, speaking to the men with forced calm. Then, without warning, one of them grabbed her arm. Ethan's breath caught. He started to move toward the door, but Marcia's eyes met his through the glass. She shook her head slowly, a silent plea. He froze. Moments later, the men escorted her out through a side door and into a black sedan. It sped away, taillights disappearing into the fog. Ethan stood there, soaked and shaking, the flash drive burning cold in his hand. He didn't know where they were taking her, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever was inside that hidden file was the reason she'd vanished. And now, it was his problem. The rain hadn't stopped since that morning. It drummed steadily on the roof of Dr. Layla Monroe's office, the muted rhythm blending with the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. Ethan sat across from her, arms folded, shoulders tense. The flash drive was hidden in the inner pocket of his jacket. He hadn't dared to leave it at home. Layla observed him quietly before speaking. You said you've been having trouble sleeping again? Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on the carpet. Nightmares. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, Marcia, and those men, the car driving away. You mentioned she gave you something before they took her, Layla said gently. His hand unconsciously moved toward his chest. Yeah, a flash drive. She said it could get her killed, maybe both of us. Layla tilted her head. Have you looked at it? He hesitated. Not yet. I'm afraid of what I'll find. The therapist leaned forward slightly. Sometimes the only way out of fear is through it, Ethan. You've been carrying the weight of her disappearance for years. Maybe it's time to confront the truth. He sighed. That's easy for you to say. You didn't watch someone you love get dragged away right in front of you. Layla's expression softened. You still love her? After everything? I shouldn't. His voice trembled. But yeah, I do. And I hate that part of myself for it. For a long moment, the only sound was the clock. Then Layla spoke, her tone deliberate. Tell me about the guilt. He rubbed his forehead. The guilt that I moved on, that I tried to rebuild, that I even thought she might have deserved what happened. I thought she left me for money, for someone else. But now, it was something much darker. Layla nodded, jotting something down. You're describing survivor's guilt, Ethan. You were left behind in the wreckage of someone else's choices. Ethan looked up. What if her choices weren't hers? Then whose were they? He hesitated, his mind flashing back to the men in suits, the fear in Marcia's eyes. Leonard Ward's name whispered like a curse. I think she was caught in something she couldn't control. Layla's pen paused. And now you're caught in it too. The words hit him harder than expected. He exhaled, leaning back in the chair. Sometimes I feel like someone's watching me. A black car near my apartment. Same one twice this week. Maybe it's paranoia, or maybe... Layla's brow furrowed. Have you told anyone else? He shook his head. No, I don't want to drag anyone into this. She leaned forward. You already are. By keeping it bottled up, by isolating yourself. Ethan, whatever's on that drive, it has power over you until you face it, but you shouldn't do it alone. Her voice was steady, almost soothing. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt the tightness in his chest ease a little. You think I should open it? I think you should decide what matters more, your fear or your need for the truth. The session ended, but her words clung to him as he left. The rain had softened to a mist, the air thick and cold. He walked toward his car, hands deep in his pockets, and noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Same make, same tinted windows. His pulse quickened. He turned his head casually, pretending not to notice, but his reflection in the car's window betrayed his unease. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, the flash drive resting before him. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Layla's voice echoed in his mind. The only way out of fear is through it. With a shaking hand, he inserted the drive into his laptop. The screen blinked to life, showing a single folder labeled Nightfall. He hesitated, cursor hovering over it. Then he clicked. A password prompt appeared. Ethan's breath caught. Marcia's voice from years ago whispered through his memory. Her old password, something she'd said she'd never forget. He typed it in slowly. The folder opened. Inside were hundreds of files, bank statements, offshore accounts, photographs of politicians, and one labeled Therapy Recordings. Ethan's blood ran cold. He clicked it and saw the name of the patient, Dr. Layla Monroe. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart hammering so hard it drowned out every sound in the apartment. Dr. Layla Monroe. The name blinked beside a row of encrypted files. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The therapist he'd trusted, who'd listened to his guilt, his pain, his obsession, was part of the same network that had destroyed Marcia's life. He clicked one of the audio files. Static hissed through the speakers, followed by a woman's calm voice, Layla's. Session 42. Subject, Marcia Ward. Patient believes her boss, Leonard Ward, is using corporate channels for laundering. She's terrified. I've advised silence until I can assess the danger. Ethan's stomach twisted. Marcia had seen Layla too. The next recording was dated a month later. Session 58. Subject unstable. She's paranoid. Claims she's being followed. I've reported her concerns to the necessary contacts. Reported, Ethan whispered. Reported to who? He opened another file, a scanned contract marked with an insignia from Ward Industries. And under the signature line, written neatly in black ink, was Dr. Layla Monroe, psychological consultant. Rage ignited in his chest. The woman who'd pretended to heal him had once helped silence Marcia. He snatched his phone and called her office. No answer. The voicemail played her calm, professional voice. You've reached Dr. Monroe. Leave a message. He ended the call without speaking. Then, in a sudden rush, he packed the laptop, the flash drive, and the printed records into a folder. He couldn't think straight, but one thought screamed through the fog. He had to confront her. Layla's office was dark when he arrived. The rain had returned, sweeping through the parking lot in cold sheets. Ethan banged on the glass door, calling her name. No response. But her light was on inside. He jimmied the side window open with his keys and slipped through. The air inside was warm, faintly perfumed with lavender and old paper. Her desk was immaculate except for one open notebook. He froze when he saw the first line written across the top of the page. If he learns the truth, it's over. Beneath it, his name, Ethan Cole. Footsteps sounded behind him. Looking for something. He turned sharply. Layla stood in the doorway, her coat dripping, her eyes unreadable. "Why?" he demanded. "Why didn't you tell me you knew Marcia?" Layla closed the door softly. "Because it wasn't safe. You were part of it." His voice cracked. "Ward's company, the files, the therapy notes. You worked for them." "I worked around them," she corrected, stepping closer. "I was brought in to assess Marcia's mental state after she threatened to expose Leonard. He wanted proof she was unstable, but I saw what was really happening. She wasn't paranoid. She was right." "Then why report her?" Layla's expression darkened. "Because I thought I could protect her from the inside. I sent false reports to keep her off the radar while I tried to collect evidence. But someone found out." "Leonard?" She shook her head. "No. Someone higher. Leonard was small time compared to the ones behind Project Nightfall. After his death, the others buried everything, and now they're cleaning up loose ends." Ethan stared, disbelief mixing with dread. "You're saying Marcia was never the thief?" Layla's voice trembled. "She was the real victim. She uncovered the truth and paid for it. I've been trying to track her ever since she disappeared. But those men you saw? They're not corporate security. They're mercenaries, tied to the same offshore accounts you saw on that drive." Ethan's throat went dry. "Then where is she now?" Layla hesitated. "Alive, maybe, but in hiding. There were rumors she escaped the transport that night. If she did, she'll surface soon. And when she does, they'll come for both of you." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating her face. Haunted, tired, resolute. Ethan sank into a chair, his hands trembling. "So, what do we do?" Layla looked toward the rain-smeared window. "We finish what Marcia started." He met her eyes, seeing no trace of the calm therapist anymore, only a woman who had lived with guilt as long as he had. For the first time, their secrets aligned, but as she reached for her bag, Ethan noticed a faint red light blinking near the window. A small camera tucked behind the curtain, its lens glowing through the dark. Layla's face went pale. "They found us." Ethan turned to the window, heart pounding, just as headlights flared outside. The night after the break-in felt endless. Ethan sat in his apartment, every shadow crawling across the walls like a living thing. Layla had disappeared before dawn, leaving behind only a scribbled note. "Don't trust anyone. I'll contact you when it's safe." He hadn't heard from her since. The next evening, as rain streaked the windows again, he opened his mailbox and found a single envelope inside, cream-colored, sealed with wax, and addressed in Marcia's handwriting. His breath hitched. The postmark was smudged, but the date, 3 days ago, made his pulse race. Hands trembling, he carried it to the table and stared at it for a long time before breaking the seal. Inside was a folded letter and a small photograph, him and Marcia, smiling, taken long before everything shattered. The letter began in her familiar, careful script. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then the people I feared most are finally closing in. I never wanted you tangled in this, but I should have known you'd come looking. You always did chase truth, even when it hurt." His eyes blurred, but he forced himself to keep reading. "You deserve to know the truth about what happened 5 years ago. Leonard's network wasn't just about money. It was about control. They funded political campaigns, private security firms, even psychological operations. Layla was hired to evaluate me, but she became my only ally. She helped me fake my death the night of the cafe. Those men weren't there to kill me. They were there to take me somewhere I could disappear." Ethan froze, rereading the words. Fake my death. Layla risked everything. She told them I'd broken down completely, that I was useless. It bought us both time, but I couldn't come back, Ethan. Not with everything tied to that file. If I had, they'd have killed us both. He felt his chest tighten. Every sleepless night, every unanswered question. She'd been alive, watching, hiding. You once told me the truth is never free. You were right. I've spent 5 years running, gathering what I could, trying to expose the network from the outside. And now I think I finally have enough. But I can't finish it alone. There was a faint smudge near the bottom, maybe a tear, maybe blood. The flash drive you have isn't the full story. There's a second one, hidden where we first met. Remember the park bench under the willow tree? Look beneath the right armrest. Inside, you'll find everything. If I don't make it back, promise me you'll deliver it to someone who still believes in justice. The name is on the file. Project Mercy, D. Whitaker. He's the only one I trust. Whatever happens, Ethan, don't come looking for me. I loved you, then, now, and always. Marcia. He sat motionless, the letter trembling in his hands. The weight of her words pressed down on him until his breath came shallow and uneven. She'd been alive all this time. Layla had known. And now, everything pointed back to that park, their beginning, and maybe their end. Ethan folded the letter carefully, tucked it inside his jacket, and glanced at the rain-soaked city outside. Somewhere out there, Marcia was still fighting ghosts too big to face alone. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. The world beyond the window felt sharper, darker, alive with unseen eyes. As he stepped outside, a gust of wind caught the letter's torn envelope, spinning it across the street until it landed in a puddle near a parked car. The black sedan. Its engine hummed softly, headlights off, like a predator waiting. Ethan froze. The driver's silhouette barely moved, watching him. Then the sedan pulled out slowly, turning the corner without a sound. He ran to his car, heart pounding. Whatever was hidden under that willow tree, he had to get it before they did. The storm intensified as he drove toward Willow Park, lightning splitting the sky open. The wipers beat frantically, the world flashing between light and dark. In his jacket, the letter pressed against his chest. Marcia's last words, her confession, her plea. He didn't know if he'd see her again, but as thunder rolled overhead, he made himself a silent promise. If the truth had cost her everything, he would make sure it finally meant something. Willow Park was empty except for the sound of rain striking the leaves. Streetlights glimmered through the fog, painting the benches in soft gold halos. Ethan pulled up his hood, clutching Marcia's letter to his chest as he crossed the soaked grass toward their bench, the same one where she had told him she loved him for the first time. The memory cut through him like a blade. The laughter, the warmth, the innocence. Now the place felt haunted. He knelt beside the bench and ran his hand under the right armrest. For a moment, nothing. Then his fingers brushed something cold and metallic. He pulled, a small steel tube, sealed tight with electrical tape. His pulse spiked as he ripped it open and slid out a second flash drive wrapped in plastic. This is it, he thought. The truth she died for. Thunder rolled as he rushed back to his car. He plugged the drive into his laptop, waiting as the screen blinked to life. A folder appeared. Project Mercy. Inside were dozens of encrypted documents, videos, and one note labeled, "Read me first." He clicked. If you're reading this, you've found what they tried to bury. Project Mercy was created to manipulate public perception through controlled psychological studies, experiments run on civilians without consent. The lottery Marcia won wasn't random. It was engineered. Ethan's throat went dry. He scrolled further. Ward Industries used lottery systems to identify subjects with high emotional and financial vulnerability. Winners were monitored, tested, and often destroyed to study behavioral collapse under sudden wealth and betrayal. Marcia's marriage, and your reactions, Ethan, were part of the trial. He froze. His reactions? The text continued. Therapist oversight was required to monitor the subject's partner. Dr. Layla Monroe was assigned to you. She was meant to observe, not intervene. His vision blurred with disbelief. Every session, every question, every sympathetic word, it had all been data collection. He slammed his fist on the dashboard, trembling with fury. They used us, he whispered. All of it. A goddamn experiment. Scrolling further, a new name appeared. D. Whitaker, Director of Behavioral Systems. Marcia had mentioned him, the one person she said still believed in justice, but the attached video proved otherwise. It opened with a man in his 50s, silver hair sly, back, seated in an office lined with monitors. Whitaker looked straight into the camera. Ward is out. The leaks are contained. If the remaining subjects, Cole and Monroe, Surface, eliminate them. We can't risk exposure. The video ended abruptly. Ethan's stomach twisted. Whitaker wasn't the savior Marcia believed. He was the one who'd signed their death warrants. A noise outside shattered his trance. Headlights flashed through the rain, the black sedan. He yanked the flash drive from the laptop and stuffed it into his pocket. The car engine roared closer. He sprinted toward the trees, mud splashing beneath his shoes. "Ethan!" a voice shouted behind him. He turned. Layla, soaked and breathless, emerging from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here." "They were using us," he said, shouting over the storm. "The lottery, the therapy, all of it was a setup." "I know," she said, eyes wide with guilt. "I found the same files in my backup. Project Mercy was never about helping anyone. It was about control." Lightning split the sky. The sedan screeched to a stop near the path. Two men stepped out, guns glinting in the dark. Layla grabbed his arm. "Run!" They darted into the trees, branches slapping against their faces. Ethan clutched the flash drive like a lifeline. "They want this," he gasped. "It's proof of everything." Layla stumbled but kept running. Behind them, footsteps pounded through the mud, closing in fast. Ahead, through the rain, a small cabin flickered with light. An old park ranger station. Ethan pointed. "There!" They burst inside, slamming the door shut. Layla collapsed against the wall, panting. Ethan opened his laptop again, desperate to back up the files. But before he could connect, a single bullet shattered the window, lodging into the wooden beam beside him. He looked at Layla, her face pale, eyes wide. "We can't hide forever," she whispered. Ethan nodded, jaw clenched. "Then we don't hide." He inserted the flash drive once more, uploading every file to an anonymous server as gunfire echoed outside. The storm screamed against the roof, the laptop screen glowing with the progress bar. 91%, 94%. Layla's voice broke through the chaos. "Once the world sees this, they'll come for us both." Ethan's gaze hardened. "Then let them come." The upload hit 100%. Outside, the headlights shifted, approaching fast. The cabin shook as another round of bullets tore through the walls. Splinters rained across the floor. Ethan ducked, shielding the laptop with his arm. The upload had finished. The files were online, every secret exposed. But that victory felt like a ticking bomb. Layla crawled beside him, her breathing sharp and uneven. "They're not trying to capture us anymore," she said. "They're trying to erase us." Ethan checked the window. The headlights were gone. The woods outside were pitch dark except for the faint shimmer of rain against the trees. "Then we move," he whispered. "Now." They slipped out the back door, feet sinking into the mud. The night was silent except for the low growl of thunder far off in the distance. Ethan kept his hand over the pocket holding the original flash drive, the last piece of evidence that could still destroy what was left of Project Mercy. Hay ran until the lights of the ranger cabin faded behind them, replaced by the desolate hush of the forest. Finally, Layla stopped, gasping for breath. "We can't keep running forever." Ethan turned toward her, rain dripping from his hood. "We won't have to. Once those files go public, it's over." Layla's voice trembled. "You really believe that? You think the world will care? Governments were part of this, Ethan. Those people don't go down. They adapt. They'll rewrite history, erase names, and call us liars." Her words hit hard because deep down, he knew she was right. But he couldn't stop now. Not after everything Marcia had risked. A faint sound cracked through the trees. Footsteps. Then a flashlight beam swept across the darkness. Ethan grabbed Layla's arm and pulled her behind a fallen log. Two men in black tactical coats moved slowly through the rain, their radios hissing static. "Orders came straight from Whitaker," one muttered. "Cole and Monroe are priority one." Layla's jaw clenched. "They'll never stop," she whispered. Ethan leaned closer. "Then maybe it's time someone did." They crawled backward, moving deeper into the forest until the voices faded. When they finally emerged onto an empty service road, dawn was beginning to break, the sky bruised with pale gray light. An abandoned phone booth stood by the roadside, glass cracked, the receiver dangling. Ethan walked toward it, water squelching under his shoes. "I can call a contact at the Tribune," he said. "Someone who still prints stories that matter." Layla hesitated. "You'll put a target on your back." He gave a grim smile. It's already there. He dialed the number from memory. After a few rings, a groggy voice answered. Who is this? It's Ethan Cole. I have something you need to see. Proof of an operation called Project Mercy. The voice sharpened instantly. Where did you get that name? Doesn't matter. Check the encrypted Dropbox link I sent from a secure server. It's everything. Videos, bank transfers, government contracts. Publish it before they find me. The line went silent for a few seconds. Then, understood. Ethan hung up and turned to Layla. It's done. But before she could reply, headlights cut through the fog from up the road. A black SUV barreled toward them. Layla's eyes widened. Ethan, run! They dove into the ditch as the vehicle screeched to a halt. Doors slammed, voices barked commands. A gunshot rang out, grazing the earth beside them. Ethan grabbed Layla's hand, pulling her through the tall grass toward a cluster of rocks. The shot stopped. Silence fell again, thick and eerie. Then a voice echoed through a megaphone, calm and deliberate. Mr. Cole, we can make this all go away. You release the drive, the story never runs. Walk away, and you live. Layla gripped his arm. Don't listen. He stared into the fog. And if I don't? The voice replied, then we make sure no one ever hears from you again. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive, turning it over in his palm, the symbol of everything that had destroyed their lives. Layla's voice broke softly beside him. Ethan, what are you doing? He looked at her, then at the road. His decision came out in a whisper. Ending it. He stood, stepping onto the road, rain glistening on his face. The SUV's lights flared brighter, silhouettes aiming rifles at his chest. Ethan raised his voice. You can silence people, but you can't silence the truth. A single shot cracked through the dawn. Layla screamed. Ethan collapsed to his knees, the flash drive slipping from his hand and landing in the mud beside him. The SUV's engine roared, then sped away into the fog, leaving only the echo of tires and the soft patter of rain. Layla crawled to his side, trembling, her hands stained red. His breathing was shallow, fading. He tried to speak, his lips barely forming words. Tell them she won. Then his eyes stilled. Layla clutched him, sobbing, as the rain washed away the blood, and the flash drive gleamed faintly in the rising light, proof of everything they'd fought for, and the price of silence they'd both paid.